Interviews with business owners and veteran executives who share their wisdom and expertise to help you de-stress, free up time, and make more money. Profits of IT. Welcome back to Profits of IT. Today I have with me Bob. Why don't you introduce yourself to the audience, please?
Well, I go by Bob Dirks because my father's name was also Robert. And over time, I discovered that I had to differentiate myself. When I got into marketing, I had to differentiate myself, my brand, my personal brand, and my business brand. So the long story short of that is that over time, I discovered I needed to go with my initials RC for Robert Clement Dirks, because my father was Robert Ellis Dirks and we crossed lines. I actually worked in the hotel industry at one point, and there was another Bob Dirks. And I used to go to conferences and someone would say, "Well, you're not the Bob Dirks that I met before, are you?" And there was a lot of confusion. So when I started my own reputation management consultancy, I decided I better start with my own identity. So I started calling myself RC Dirks to be able to differentiate from past identities in business. So that's what you'll see if you go out, and if any of the listeners go out and look for me, they will find either RC Dirks or RC Bob Dirks in quotes in the middle. When I'm hosting a podcast and I do the introductory script, I always refer to myself as Bob because it's informal, just as you did, Jim, because you and I are acquainted with each other. I go by Bob once I get to know you, because that's the conversational thing to do. But I don't want anyone to be thrown by the branding of RC. It's something that I've run through as a marketing communications consultant over the years. That's why I named my company R. Clement Creative. I built it off of my actual personal identity, then just added a word that shows what we do. We create solutions for you that are beneficial.
Great. So, Bob, tell us something interesting about yourself outside of work.
Well, outside of work, interesting. Okay, it's difficult to do as a solo practitioner. As I think you know, Jim, it's hard to separate sometimes your personal identity from your professional identity. Um, I always enjoyed the art of conversation. I always had a facility for writing. And after my journalism studies, I studied print journalism and I studied broadcast journalism in college. After that, I decided that I would bring the two together. And I went into syndicated radio. But I didn't want to be a disc jockey. That wasn't what interested me about it. What interested me about it was the spoken word, the conversational style. And syndicated radio is that's what it was all about. We would be creating programs, individual programs, episodic programs that could be depended on to be of high quality and could be plugged in radio stations across the nation and different networks and radio networks and all of these things. And that's how I got into it. And that's how it became something that was a personal passion of mine, the art of conversation, along with a business. And I spent in the three phases of my career, I've worked in corporate communications departments for large organizations and managed those departments. I've built several from scratch for different companies. And then I moved over to the PR agency side. And when that PR agency was acquired by a large organization, I decided to go into an individual consulting practice. And what I realized is that what I had been doing in technical terms was reputation management, which is a fancy way to say helping people identify, helping people hone their own identity, articulate that identity, and then share it with people.
Cool.
And that seems to be a natural thing for podcasting. So a lot of what I do today for my clients is podcasting. It's helping. Everybody has a great story. I've come to learn in 35 years of doing work like this. Everybody has a great story to tell. It's my passion helping those people find that story, articulate that story, shape that story, and then share it. And that's really what a podcasting program is, like what you're doing, Jim.
Yes, it's the radio of today.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe that. I believe that. It's based on this idea that listening is a habit. We love listening to stories. We do. Look at how huge, look at how huge these streaming services have become.
Yes.
Look at before that, old time radio, fireside chats. It's all part of an arc that we've been following. We love stories. And we've all seen the documentaries or the shows where they show ancient peoples around fires jumping up and down and telling stories. What we've done now in the digital age is we found a way to bring that sort of that vibrancy to a digital format, but it's all part of that same arc. Is that we love to tell stories and we love to have those stories relate to it. Business people are no different, and we want to be entertained at the same time that we absorb information. Many of
Yes,
us in business,
people
especially
love
today.
entertainment.
Yep, you want it to be engaging, and that's what I love most about podcasting. Is I've tried to learn from that history of listening to radio, being involved in syndicated radio, to try to bring those techniques to bear for in the right way that works for a business.
Got it. So, if I'm an IT business owner and I've been thinking about doing a podcast, what advice do you have for me if I've never done it before? And so, I guess, what should I know about podcasts, and why should I be doing a podcast in the first place?
Well, it comes down to digital strategy. I do some teaching as an adjunct instructor for a local university. And the first thing I talk about is the nature of what I call the digi-social sphere. Almost all of our communications now are somehow dependent, whether they're business or personal, are somehow dependent on this digi-social sphere, this space through which digital technologies take our communications, our voices, our text. What we have to understand about that is that all digital technology does two things. It elevates the scale of what we can do, and it broadens the scope of what we can do. So we should look at podcasting that same way, especially if you're a small IT service, if you're an SMB IT services firm, you should look at it that way. What communication need do I have that I can turn to podcasting? Well, which one do I need to broaden in scope or elevate in scale? Because I can become more efficient and more effective, which is really another way of saying elevating and broadening. Broadening is to make it more efficient and more effective. So let's say part of your practice as an IT services firm is you do a lot of help desk work. Well, you could do a weekly, monthly podcast that is a digest of all the biggest problems that your clients are experiencing. Now, you've already solved those through your service. Depending on how you do your service calls, you might record them, just like we always hear when we call a service team. This can be recorded. Well, there's a way to produce a podcast on a regular basis that digests all the biggest problems that your clients are having. You don't have to attach their names to it, but you can now start broadcasting shows about, think of all the Mr. Fix-It shows that are very successful in radio and now are very successful on YouTube, are very successful as podcasts. And I think you and I were talking before we started this conversation, before we turned on the recorder, about how you also distribute your material through YouTube. So YouTube and podcasting is intersecting now. It's another thing that digital technologies allow us to do. You could digest everything, a whole categorize what comes in on your help desk, and you can start putting that out on a regular basis to your customers because you own your own radio station. Podcasting, think of it as owning your own radio station and the ability to broadcast to all the antennas, the smartphones that every one of your customers organizations are holding in their hands. You could now help them solve problems before they even now before they even call you. Now, I don't know if you're like me, everybody has different preferences. I become annoyed by the time that I've gone for help to a help desk,
Uh-huh.
and they say, if I engage in the chat and they say, you can solve your own problem by reading this Q&A. Well, if I wanted to read a Q&A, I would have never turned on the chat, right?
Right.
Because I don't want that level of engagement. And that's my preference. And what are we always trying to do in customer service is to figure out what people would like to do. If you have a podcast with the five, or the three biggest problems, of the month, and you give one of your help desk team or one of your people who are very good in conversation, if you give them the ability to give a few simple steps that'll solve 80% of the problem somebody has, and then they get in the habit, because listening is a habit, they get in the habit of listening to your podcast every week, they may start solving 80% of the problems ahead of time. They also are going to feel more satisfied. They're only going to
Yep.
contact you when they just can't do it themselves. And they're less frustrated. They feel more empowered. And then if they listen to the podcast, then you can assume, as your help desk technician can assume, well, if you listen to the podcast, then you've probably gone all of these steps, right? So we don't have to go over them again. That's right. So we don't have to go over them again. So that's one idea. The other thing is to how to sell different areas of service. Cybersecurity is huge. A lot of IT services
Definitely.
firms want to be in IT managed services for cybersecurity. Well, you could put out an issues-based podcast that says, here are the latest issues. You could draw from the headlines. You can draw from simple steps that sort of fix it mentality that we talked about. There's a lot of different ways. I write a newsletter for a large franchise organization of IT services firm. I write their quarterly newsletters for them.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they're issued quarterly, but they are monthly. And that's what I do. I have a mixture of issues-driven material. I have a mixture of how-to material. You can get as technical as you'd like with how-to. Where do we see this? A lot of times we see this in blogs. Many IT services firms have these blogs that some of them are very technical, where it tells you what you should be doing with it. Some of them are issues driven. They're all at different levels. And I'm presuming that those different levels are determined by their understanding of their customer base, and by extension, their desired customer base, their prospective customer base. Well, not everybody wants to go to a blog. Not everybody wants to spend that much time reading. There are some folks that might just plug into a podcast because they can do filing or paperwork, and they can listen to the issue of the week, cybersecurity, and they might be 80% of the way there by the next time they talk to their IT services firm. So those are a couple of ideas. The reality is that there is a story that you can tell to your customer base, and podcasting allows you to elevate the scale of that storytelling, to take it to a higher level than a blog can, in my opinion,
Mm-hmm.
and to broaden the scope, to take it beyond your customer base to those who might be customers, who
Yes.
might need you. And you can all do that very efficiently. It's making the best use of digital technology that I know how to do. But then again, like I said, I'm a conversationalist.
Yeah. So is it hard to start one? Like, is it difficult to start a podcast if I haven't done it before?
It depends on whether you come at it from strategy or whether you come at it from tactics. Tactically, it's not difficult. You can buy everything you need, or you already have it, the ability to record and those sort of things. And there's an entire network of podcasting platforms out there. Google Podcast, Apple. They're technically they're directories. Google Podcast and Apple are directories. Blueberry's a platform. Libsyn's a platform. These are all technicalities, but once you spend some time weaving around in there, you'll be able to figure it out. But the question becomes, if you are going to get that promise of digital technology, if you're going to get the elevated scale, and the broadened scope, you only have so much time and you only have so much money to do so. There are
Right.
costs ranging from, there are costs with podcasting ranging from the low end of $20 a month to be on Libsyn or something of that nature, all the way out to spending a lot more. If you're going to be running essentially a radio station, you be prepared to invest in it. But you have to decide, though, two things. Can I do it with consistent quality? Because listening is a habit. And
Uh-huh.
if you don't have consistent quality, you're not going to bring back listeners. They're not going to they're not going to respond to the HTML email alert that a Blueberry sends out. They're going to start deleting it. They may never bother to unsubscribe, but they're just not going to pay attention to it. So if you have to have consistent quality and you have to have compelling conversation so that you build an audience of listeners. I like to say that the great thing about podcasting is that the full spectrum. We spent a lot of time over the last decade talking about how there are 4 different generations that are now out in the working world. Well, the younger generations have all been trained by devices and services, by the devices in their hands and the services like Spotify to be listeners on a regular basis, where they have the power to choose when they listen to what they listen. Some of us who are older, we were trained on radio, like I talked about, syndicated radio,
Mm-hmm.
but we all have a listening habit. We all have that habit, and we need to be able to pay attention to the quality of our material that captures the audience's attention. What that is going to vary. Now, of course, being a consultant who does this, my belief is that you would benefit to some degree from a producer of some kind. If you're not, if you don't have the experience and expertise to do it yourself, you could be wasting a lot of time and you'll ultimately be dissatisfied. We've seen that a lot with blogs. Everybody set up a blog, but the technology was there that anybody could set up a blog. It became very inexpensive over time. But then
Mm-hmm.
we also saw, especially SMBs, we saw them lose the ability to do it internally over time. You saw it in that the frequency would go down, things would be out of date, things of that nature. That's usually it's the same competency gap that leads someone to come to an IT services firm, right? I have an IT services firm. There are 2 people in my consultancy, but I still use an IT services firm to solve my problems because I don't have the competency to solve every problem that comes
Right.
up. And I don't want to do that. It's bad management, frankly. And that's my opinion. It's bad management to do that. You should take that same. That's why I say come at it from the strategic approach. You should ask yourself, should I be doing this myself? How much of this should I be doing myself? How much am I willing to devote in terms of my time and my hours to be able to do this myself? Because I could, right? I could, just like I could be
Yep.
running a social media channel all day, every day, because the technology allows me to do that. That's the hard part. You asked, is it hard? It's hard if you come at it from the strategic part because you have to ask yourself a bunch of questions first. You have to really understand your identity as an organization. I mentioned I'm a reputation management consultant, which
Right.
means you have to have a reputation to manage. And I can't give you one. I can sell you a podcast individual episode, and I can tell you it's going to be a high quality. I can tell you that people will listen to it. But whether or not it achieves your objectives, well, then, that's the part where I can't do that for you. You have to do that for yourself. So that's the hard part. But how much of my services you might need, or how much of the services of somebody inside, or the time of somebody inside your organization, that's why it's hard to come at it from the strategic level. It's easy to come at it from the tactical level because all the tools are there and they're highly available, and it doesn't take you that long to figure out how to do the basics. But are you going to be able to do that over and over again? Is it sustainable? And is it going to work for you? If you think you have that kind of time and you have somebody in the organization who knows how to do that, maybe that's best for you. When I worked, when I handled the relationship management organization for a small PR firm, I would train my new account managers this way. So there are 3 types of customers. There are the can'ts, the don'ts, and the won'ts. The can'ts turn to you because they just don't have the capability, but they generally have the uh, the shortest relationship time for various reasons. They acquire the competency over time, and then they go they learn how to do it themselves, and then the relationship shrinks. The don'ts is that it just isn't what they do, but that's also fraught with risk because they don't necessarily understand the value of your service. So they tend to be, they tend to be shorter relationships too. The won'ts are the ones who come at it from a strategic perspective. They know that they could do what you do, but they won't because they know it's not the best thing per strategy, per the business's needs to meet the objectives for a lot of different reasons. And it's really hard, to sort of those things out. Every small to medium sized business knows how difficult it is to stay on top of your marketing strategy. They all know to some degree. But there is a solution out there for podcasting. If you want high quality and you want to gain an audience, you can get it. There are organizations, there are teams like mine. I can tell you it will be good and people will listen to it. Whether or not it works for you, that's something we can work on together to make sure that it does.
So, what are any parting thoughts as far as what else people should know about podcasts if you're an IT business owner or executive?
The best insight that I can give is to think of it as another way to have a conversation with a prospect with a customer. It's another way to have a conversation. We've seen this same sort of analogy applied to social media. And it's true. It's true. It's just another form of conversation. It's people talking to people. For the program that I produce for Creating IT Futures, which is the tech workforce charity of CompTIA, one of the largest IT trade associations in the world. What I do for Technologist Talk, this program, is that I take the stories and I have the people who are living those stories tell those stories. As the host of it, and I also have my daughter Celine is the producer of our complimentary program, Technologist Tales. I also have her involved, and we facilitate conversations. That's what we do. We structure the conversations ahead of time. We send the questions. We walk the people through it. So what they can do is they show up and I always say before an interview, I always say, just show up and be you. We'll do the rest. Yeah. We'll take good care of you. It just comes down to people talking to people, telling stories, the business stories or the personal stories that they are living at that time. And that goes back to my earlier discussion, is that there are professionals who know how to facilitate that. There are professionals like us where you can say, I want to achieve this and I can only spend this much. And we'll come back and we'll say, well, here's how you do it. But it still comes down to this. If there's a place in your business where you want to elevate the conversation, you want to take it to a level that it hasn't been before, if you want to broaden the scope of your conversations with any audience for whatever reason, existing customers, prospective customers, podcasting is an excellent way to do it. What we're seeing, the studies that are being done, we're seeing that it's growing very fast. There's a lot of different reasons. The pandemic has been one of them. We're seeing a desire for people to hear other people tell them stories, just like the old time radio days.
Got it. So if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, how would they do that?
Well, one of the best ways to get to know our Clement Creative is through the programs that we produce. So you can go on to Google Podcasts, you can go on to Apple Podcasts, or you can go on to Blueberry or Libsyn, and you can search for Technologist Talk or Technologist Tales, and you can find
Technologist Talk or Technologist Tales.
Yes, you should be able to find them. There are a lot of different tech talk programs that are out there. Ours is Technologist. talk and technologist tales. It's a good way to get to understand what it is we do. The other thing you can do is you can go into LinkedIn and you can I'll bring the conversation full circle. You can go into LinkedIn and you can look for Bob Dirks and you'll find me.
Bob Dirks, and
it's Dirkes.
Dirkes.
It's spelled Dirkes, but it's pronounced Dirks.
Got it. All right. Well, it's been very informative, Bob. Thank you for your time here. And until next time, I'm Jim Punzenberger. I'm the founder of Neutron Solutions and the creator of the Managed Prospecting System. So if any listeners are looking to generate leads and appointments without cold calling, look us up at managedprospectingsystem.com. And until next time, thank you for your time, Bob. And
thank you.
Have a great day. Bye for now. Thank you for tuning in to the Profits of IT. Please smash that like button, subscribe, and share.